And I'm up and running. Let me just get the mic and get the camera synced up with me. Boom. There you go. Apologies. I had technical difficulties. So this is the first stream and it's bombed. So apologies to everyone for being late. So let me introduce myself. So I am Philip Bourne, the Brummie that hails from Birmingham, and this is the first live stream on change tips and tools. And today I thought I'd have a go at showing some training that I've done many times in different organisations, and you'll see how old I actually am when you see what we're actually going to build and some of the parts in that project, which is build a computer. And you tell me if you've ever heard of some of these parts. So I started off in manufacturing. That's where I was first introduced to project management. I've been doing change management for over 30 years, and I'm currently working in construction as a head of PMO. And today, I want to walk you through how to build a computer. But first, the things you need to think about before you create that project in MS Project to build that computer. So without further ado, let me share the screen. So also in the description, you will see a link to a folder where I've put all the support material. So if you want to follow along, then be my guest, and let's do this, as I say on the channel. So first of all, what we're going to attempt to go through over the next couple of hours, and we'll see how you all do, but we're going to cover 4 sort of parts in this training, and by the end of it you should be able to build a project plan from scratch and make it fully resourced as well. I'll show you some ways how to report progress, how to report slippage, and how to handle some of the reporting as well within MS Project. I think the key thing is that this is not me going through MS Project in theory. These are the things that I've learned over the last many decades, where I've developed a bruise on my forehead when I've banged it at the desk when trying to do this. So we're going to build our project plan, but first I want to walk through some of the things you need to consider within your various different organizations. So and then I'll show you how to build a computer considering that product breakdown structure and what a product breakdown structure is. We'll open up project for the first time and so on. So this is everything we're going to do. So let's move to the next slide. So I think the first thing is when we talk about projects and how they're funded. So first of all, let's make sure we're all on the same page and what a project is. So it's a temporary endeavor to deliver something unique, and it has a finite lifespan. So it has a defined lifespan, so it's not forever. So that's what a project is. Now, in a lot of organizations, or all organizations, they only have, let me get my little laser pointer going as well, they only have so much budget. So the way that they categorize, the way that they're going to invest in change is they will look at, well, what's mandatory? So what are the things that they must do to keep doing business? Yeah. Next, they'll then prioritize regulatory or policy type projects that are going to deliver things for policy or regulatory requirements. And then you'll see maintenance projects. So these are typically keeping the lights on. So, and these again are all important. You've then, in a lot of organizations, you've got hearts and minds. So within your organization, you'll typically have values within that organization. And you'll know when you go through your individual reviews or your mid-year review or your final year review on your performance reviews, they'll talk about the values and how those values inform your performance. So hearts and minds, they don't necessarily cover the first 3, and they don't necessarily make the company any additional money commercially. but they're important to that company's values. And then finally, at the very bottom, you've got discretionary. And these are typically projects that you invest in that are going to deliver some type of change or unique item that's going to make the company some money or add additional benefit. And it's always the thing that gets squeezed. So when an organization's looking at these discretionary projects, there's a number of things that they have to consider. So firstly, they think about the net present value. So how much return? So when they spend money on a project, what's their return on investment from this project? The other thing they'll think about is a thing called internal rate of return. And again, this is how much investment growth is this going to generate as a project. And then finally, you've got the payback period. So how long is this project going to pay for itself? When am I going to get my money back and start making money in its own right? Now, I've done a number of videos on the channel around investments, and afterwards I'll put them into the link if you want to check those out, and I'll show you how to build Excel templates to do all these things when trying to work out the cost and the benefit of a project. So once we've got that, the other thing you need to be aware of is that your organization will have many different approaches to change. So for example, you've got managed by stages. So this is taken from Prince 2 principles. You've then got waterfall, and this is taken from APM. And then a lot of organizations, especially software development, look at agile. So you've got agile here, enterprise agile or scaled agile, and sometimes it's known as SAFe. The thing is, you need to be aware of what your organization's using as far as their approach and their change management framework. So for example, this is taken from a company where their portfolio was managed by a number of these different projects, where you've got software delivery lifecycle type projects and the phases it goes through, and they would typically mandate what are the mandatory deliverables, and then depending on the control and the complexity around that project is that you'll have different quality levels as well that you'll need to be aware of. But the key thing is, within your organization, make sure that you are aware of the approaches to change and what the mandatory requirements are within your organization. And the best people to go to is typically your PMO or your group PMO, and they will have champions that will be able to put you on the right track. Now, once you've got that and you're aware of that and you're aware of who those people are and what they have as far as a change management framework and what it consists of, you then need to think about your planning. So you don't just run into MS Project and start building a project plan. There are a number of things that you need to go through. Now, I'm a big believer that the recipe for successful project management is 20% the widget and 80% the people. So for a project manager in that widget, when you are baselining that project plan, and then for ongoing projects that are larger and more complex, it is a fundamental tool of the trade for any project manager. And the thing that you'll start off with is possibly a project initiation document or a project brief, which outlines maybe an outline business case, a statement of the scope, some key assumptions, etc. Well, that'll be your starting point, and you'll agree that with your sponsor and some key stakeholders. Then, based on that, you'll start the planning process. And this is very much bringing the right people, the right SMEs into a number of workshops. And that's where you'll start to work out the things that you are going to deliver, the dependencies, the resourcing and costs, etc. So the first thing that you'll work out is, what is a product breakdown structure? So what are you going to deliver? The second thing is your work breakdown structure. So you'll think about what this is, what are the activities that you are going to perform to deliver your product breakdown structure, and who's going to deliver it. And in there, you'll have your work-based estimates, your duration-based estimates, and you'll work out key dependencies, etc. Now, once you've got that, you'll start to build your project plan and you'll draft it based on your PID, your PBS, and your work breakdown structure, and so on. And this will all be gathered through a number of workshops with the right stakeholders. Yeah. Now, once you've got that, you'll update your PID, and your PID, really the best way I've described a PID, or I've heard a PID being described, is think of it as a filing cabinet. This is where you store all the elements and the important elements of how you are going to manage your project. And it is a living and breathing document. Now, once you've agreed all the elements, you are then ready to baseline your project plan. Now, the thing is, baselining your project plan is vital. It's not just a switch you flick in MS Project, because it's vital because it provides clarity to your and transparency. It represents a stake in the ground. So when you draw that line in the sand, as far as how you're going to manage change against your project, and it also forms a delivery contract with your stakeholders, your sponsor, and your team. Okay. So once you've got that, let's talk about what a product breakdown structure is. Now, we're going to use a computer as our example for this demonstration, and you'll see how old I am. So the project scope is that we need to build a computer, and that computer consists of sub deliverables like a main unit, a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard. And then when you look at each of those sub deliverables within your product breakdown structure, they also have sub deliverables within themselves. And you'll start to see this numbering. And again, the monitor and mouse likewise will have similar deliverables, sub deliverables within them. So this makes our overall product breakdown structure. And also keep an eye on this numbering, because we'll look at how that helps us build shape within our project plan when we move into MS Projects. But the thing is once you've agreed what you're going to deliver, what your product breakdown structure through those workshops, and then you've worked out the activities that you are going to do, i.e. your work breakdown structure. In other words, you've worked out how you will build and deliver it, or your work breakdown structure. You've worked out who's going to do it, and they would have provided you, depending on their work-based estimates or duration-based estimates. And you will agree your dependencies, both internal and external, to your project. You'll also have a number of assumptions, and these are fundamentally project management speak for guesses. And guesses, and I've always been surprised when we have assumption logs that seem to have a very long lifespan. They should only really exist within your initiation document and through your initiation phase, but going forwards, they then should be managed as risks if you cannot validate them, and then you manage them through your risk management framework. But once you have all this, you're now ready to build your project plan. Now, just so you get used to the way that I've done the materials in here. So again, in the description, there's a link to the materials, and you'll see a PDF with everything you're seeing on screen now. And you'll see it's literally paint by numbers. So you read the number, do what it says, and follow the instructions. Yeah, but I'm not going to show you in PowerPoint. We're going to do it. So the first thing that we need to do is to, when we open project for the first time, is to make sure we're all starting from the same place. So let me escape out of that. And here is the project file. Now, one of the things to be aware of is that you've got a number of ribbons that I refer to. This is where you enter your tasks within the task ribbon, and we're in the Gantt chart view at the moment. And this is the graphical representation of your Gantt chart. Yeah. Now, there's a number of settings that we're going to do here. And the first thing what I've done already is I've saved this as MS Project Training Part 1, Part 1. And it's important to do that. So this here, which is the timeline, since this came out, which I think was 2016, I don't think anybody has ever used that timeline. I've never seen anybody use it. So we're going to get rid of that. And also, when sometimes, depending on your organization, this formula bar, a bit like Excel, sometimes is not visible. And I find this really useful when I'm updating or making adjustments in my plan. So I'll show you how to make that visible. And the second thing is when you are creating tasks, is that you've got manual tasks and you've got automated tasks, and we want automated tasks. So I'm going to show you to do those settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to go to the Schedule options here. And here, so for yourselves, if you haven't saved it as MS Project Training Part 1, it will say Project 1, for example. And I'm going to change this to Auto Schedule. Now I can say All New Projects. And then you close it down. Next time any of these changes you made will be applied to any new projects that you open. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to use MS Project Training Part 1. And I'm going to change this to auto scheduled for any new tasks that we create. Sip of water there. Then the next thing, I want to get that entry bar up. So I'm going to go to Display. And what I'm going to do is make sure on the display here is make sure that the entry bar option is ticked. I'm then going to click OK. The next thing I'm going to do is get rid of this. So I'm going to go to View and I'm going to untick the timeline. And there we go. Then what I'm going to do is make sure you save it, and I'm going to save it as MS Project Training Part 1. But the other thing is when you're working with MS Projects, and I don't know if you're aware of this, it assumes that your start date is the date that you create the file. So everything will be based on the date that you create the file. So for example, this will be the 14th of June 2025 for this project file. But I don't want that, so I'm going to set the project start date, which is, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to Project Ribbon, Project Information, and I'm then going to set that to the 7th of July. And then click OK. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create some tasks in here. And the best way that I've experienced creating tasks is and building your project plan from that data and all that information you've got from your workshops is I start it off like a shopping list. So the first thing is that we're going to build a computer. So I'm going to set a parent task up here, which is going to be build. I'm going to type in build a new computer. And I'm going to hit enter. Now you can see a number of things here. So it's defaulted to 1 day duration in the duration. If I just expand these columns by double clicking on them, and it's automatically set that task to start on the 7th of July. And because it's 1 day duration, it finishes on the 7th of July. Now, when following these exercises, I'm not going to make you type all this out, but it'd be good to type a few of them out just so you get used to how it feels. But what I've done is if I go to open up Excel here, I've created the list of all the tasks. So I'm going to take main unit, scroll all the way down, select them all, do Control, copy. I'm going to go back to my project file, and I'm going to do Control V. And there you go. I'll then copy and paste all those activities in there. I'm just going to move this to the right so I can see all my activities. So now once I've done that, I mean, one of the things that we need to be able to do then is, and again, remember to keep saving your project file, yeah, is we need to give this project shape. So if we go back to here and you look at, this is the way it looks at the moment, is we want to give it some shape like this based on our PBS. And we also want to see how it relates to the overall product breakdown structure numbering. So if I just escape out of that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the task name header here and do insert column. And I'm going to type WBS like so. Yeah. And I'm going to select WBS and then just shrink that down. So there you can see the WBS numbers. Now, as I start to give this shape through indenting, yeah, I want you to watch what happens to these numbers and what happens to the graphical representation on the Gantt chart as well. Yeah. So I'm going to select from the main unit all the way down to assemble computer. Then on the task ribbon, I'm going to do a right indent. And you can see that's now changed to a summary task. And now you can see 1, 1.2, 1.1, 1.2, and so on. I'm then going to do the same for the main unit. So let's select the main unit. So everything underneath the main unit, I'm going to do a right indent. I'm going to take the monitor, do the same. And just look at how this numbering here is changing. I'll do the mouse. And then I'm going to do the keyboard as well. And again, if we look at this, and if I just bring that up a visual, you can now see over here on the WBS and how that relates to our product breakdown structure. So you can see the main unit 1.1, and so on. So that's just a useful guide to look at your product breakdown structure and give it some unique numbering based on your deliverables and how that relates to your work breakdown structure also. So once you've done that and once you've given it some shape, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to enter some estimates. So again, let me bring the visual up and let's talk about what this is. So when you've sat in your workshops, you have talked to people and they've given you estimates. Now, depending on their style and your own style, you may prefer to work with work-based estimates, which is, this is how long I think it's physically going to take somebody to do the work, or you work based on duration-based estimates. So I know it's going to take this long no matter how many people are doing it, for example. So based on those types of estimates, let me show you how you would enter them into MS Project. Yeah. So let me escape out of that. So if we take our main unit, these are duration-based estimates, but however, you'll notice we can't see anywhere to enter our work-based estimates. So I'm going to right-click on duration, insert column, I'm going to type work, I'm going to select work from the drop down, and there we go. So we can now, let me just move this again over to the right so you can see it. So our main unit, we received all the estimates as fixed durations. Now the default here for work, and you set that, so if I go to file and I go to options and we go to schedule, you can see what the defaults are for duration is days and work is entered in hours. Yeah, so you can see those defaults there. So if I just click cancel that, so for our main unit, duration based estimates, so the assemble main unit housing is 1 day, so I'm going to enter a 1 there, and the hard disk drive is 2 days, and then I've got 1.5 days. And again, this is all in the materials, the support materials, if you want to follow along. The assemble motherboard is 2.5 days. and the assemble main unit is 1.5 days. And I'm going to hit enter. So those are my fixed duration estimates. Now, you'll notice here that it says 2.5 days as the overall duration. And that's because we've not created any dependencies or any relationships between the tasks. So therefore, project assumes if this was a race, they're all starting at the same time, but this task finishes 2.5 days. So it's the longest task. So therefore, the race or the duration is 2.5 days long. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, let's look at work-based estimates. So the monitor, we've received work-based estimates. And again, I hope building a project isn't that long, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And if I do build the monitor housing, it's 16 hours. And the electronics is 32 hours. The assembly electronics, that is 26 hours. And assemble monitor is 16 hours. Now, hopefully, if you're following along, you should have at the top there for the monitor 90 hours total. So because these are all tasks that make up the monitor, it's adding all those up or summing them up, as it were. Now, the mouse is duration. So I received duration estimates. So let me put those duration estimates in as well. So that's 1.5 days for the body. And then it's 0.5 days. I mean, who's ever heard of a ball within a mouse? I mean, that's how old I am. When I first started doing this, when we had a mouse for our laptop, it had a ball in, not an optical as it does today as standard. And then finish the mouse electronics. That's going to be 2 days. And then the assemble mouse is going to be 1 day. And then the final work estimates for the keyboard is going to be 12 hours, 16 hours, and I've got another 12 hours. And then assemble keyboard is going to be 12 hours also. And then finally, the assemble computer is going to be 1 day duration. And I'm going to hit return. Now, that's how you would enter your work-based estimates or your duration-based estimates. But what you'll notice is that work is not calculating based on the duration, and also the hours don't seem to impact the duration from our work-based estimates. And that's because we're missing part of the equation, which is the unit, i.e. resource, which we'll cover in part 2. Okay. So now that we've done that, we need to enter dependencies. So let me get another visual up for you. Let's talk about what dependencies are. So dependencies are a bit like you need to complete this task, or it needs to be completed at the same time before you can either complete your work in the next activity or start that work. So for example, if you've got a house, you need to build the foundations, you need to put the walls on before you can put and build the walls, and then before you can build the roof. So that's an example of dependencies. Now within MS Project, there are 4 types of dependency. So let's go through each of those. I'm going to sip of water. So the first is finish to start dependency. And again, what I'll do is get my laser pointer going. Just remember this FS, because when we're putting the dependencies in, this is key to remember. So when you open MS Project up, its default is to plan from a start date, okay? And this is the default dependency type for finish to start, yeah? So that's the default for when you're planning from a start date. Fundamentally, what it means is that the predecessor has to finish before you can start the next task. You've then got start. and again, which is SS. And this fundamentally means that the predecessor and the successor have to start at the same time. Okay. You've then got finish to start, which again is a bit like start, start. It means that the predecessor and the successor task in this driving path have to finish at the same time. Now, when you look at start to finish, this is a bit of an odd one. So this is saying that the predecessor has to start before the successor can finish. Does anybody have an idea when would you use this? Because it seems like a bit of a bizarre dependency. Well, the answer is that sometimes you will plan from a start date and you'll get project to give you an idea of when you're going to finish that work. The second is that you'll plan, so that's from left to right, yeah. But then you've got certain projects where you're planning from a deadline. So you need to hit a deadline. So you're planning from right to left based on a finish date. And this is the default dependency type when you're planning from right, i.e. a deadline, to left. And you're trying to work out, well, when do I need to start the project to meet the deadline? So hopefully that makes sense. So again, I'm going to escape out of that and we'll then start to look at our dependencies. So with that in mind, when we are, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this so we can see the dependency column here, which is called predecessors. You can insert the successors if you want, but we've got the predecessors visible here. So what are our predecessing tasks for dependencies? And one of the things that we look at the main unit is in the workshop, what we're looking at it and how we're going to assemble it is that fundamentally you can't assemble the main unit until these tasks have been completed first. So the way that we would do that and tell project that information from the workshop is I'm going to go into assemble main unit and go into the predecessor. If you look over on the left here, you can see task IDs or task numbers. And if I go into and type 3, 4, which is the assemble hard drive, I do comma. So remember, it's finish start is the default here, and I'm going to do 5, and I'm going to do comma 6, like so, and I'm going to hit return. So you can now see, and obviously the blue shading here denotes what's changing within your plan. And you can see now how all these tasks will be done in parallel, but the final task won't start until they're all finished. Yeah. Now, as far as the monitor, this is going to be a standard waterfall, a bit like the APM diagram. So the way that I'm going to do that is that we're going to do that task. Once we finish that, then we're going to start this one and so on. So I'm going to highlight them all, select them. And on the task ribbon, I'm going to select this link chain icon, and I'm going to link them. And there you can see now it's done that waterfall view in the Gantt chart. Yeah. So let's do the same for the mouse. So again, if I select the mouse and let's select those tasks. Again, I'm going to link them. And there we go. And then finally, I'm going to do the keyboard. And again, I'm just going to link them all. And there we go. Now, imagine that you're in your workshop, and your quality team say to you, right, before you can assemble the computer, we need 2 days, a 2-day duration to check everything and make sure everything is fit for purpose before you assemble the computer. And the way that you would tell project this is by putting a lag in. And this is where knowing the finish start really helps. So the way that I'm going to do that is assemble main computer. So we've got to build the main unit, which is, and again, if I take a step back, is there are schools of thought where it says do not create a dependency against summary tasks. I don't believe that. I believe, don't overuse it, but I think in certain circumstances, it's a really useful functionality in MS Project. So what I'm going to do is I want this to start 2 days after the main unit, the monitor, the mouse, and the keyboard. So because of that quality check that the quality team are doing. So I'm going to enter in the predecessor. I'm going to do 2 for that. I'm going to do finish start. So whenever you're doing any type of calculation with your dependencies, you need to say, well, what dependency type it is. And I'm going to do 2 finish start plus 2D for days. I'm then going to do comma. I'm going to do the next one, which is task 8. So I'm going to do task 8 finish start plus 2 days for that. I'm then going to do a comma to separate the dependencies. So for the next dependency, which is the mouse, I'm going to do task 13 finish start plus 2 days. And then I'm going to do comma, and then finally for the keyboard, which is task 18, type 18 finish start plus 2 days. And I'm going to hit enter. And there you go. So now it's moved it to the right based on that dependencies, and it's also incorporated that 2-day lag as well. So the next thing that we went through within the workshops is the team said that as far as the monitor, and this is the technician said, really what we need to make sure of is we need to be at least 80% through the main unit build so that we know there's going to be no changes to the design before we start building the monitor, mouse, and keyboard. So that means what they're saying is we've got to get through 80% of this duration before we start building the monitor, mouse, and keyboard. So let me take a swig of water. How do we tell project that information? Again, we're going to use some calculations in our dependency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the monitor. So task number 2, the main unit, we've got to be 80% of the way through it. So the way that I would do this is I would go task 2, finish start minus 20% of the total duration. And I'm going to hit return. So now you can see it's moved these activities. So it goes 80%, and then you can see it starts there before it starts building the monitor assembly. Now, you could enter it this way. So if I go to start plus 80% and hit return, it's doing the same thing. I just visually don't like the way this looks on my Gantt chart, so I prefer the finish start view. So let me put that back in. So I'm going to go to finish start minus 20% and hit return. And there you go. So I now want to do the same for the mouse and the keyboard. So all I'm going to do is select that predecessor there. I'm going to do it's the same for each one of them. I'm going to do Control Copy to copy it. I'm going to select the mouse there, predecessor, do Control V to paste it, take the keyboard, and I'm going to paste it in there as well, and Control V. And as you can see now, again, we've got the shading, and you can see how the tasks have moved. Now, in here, you can see the task that's probably driving the 2-day lag at the moment on here is the mouse assembly here, because it's the longest one. Okay. So once you've done that, I think for me, and I am old school, I believe that you should always have a milestone in your plan, or milestones. And those milestones should represent your product breakdown structure, i.e. the deliverables or the sub-deliverables within your product breakdown structure, or a key decision point within your project as well. I believe a group of activities should end in a milestone. So how do we get milestones into our project plan? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the monitor here. and I'm going to simply hit the insert key. So you can insert other tasks as well within your plan in the same way. So it's inserted a blank row above my monitor. And in here, I'm going to type when main unit assembly is complete. And I'm going to press tab. I'm going to do nothing with the hours, but I'm going to enter 0D within the duration. So when you do that with an MS project, it automatically recognizes it as a milestone. So at the moment, you can see it looks like a normal task. As soon as I hit enter, there you go. It's now a milestone right there. And as far as the dependency, it's got the predecessor is task ID number 7. So I'm going to enter number 7. I don't need to do anything else. I'm going to hit return. And there's that milestone. Now, same for the monitor. Let's put a milestone. So I can right click on the mouse and do insert task as well. And again, same principle. It's inserted it above the mouse. And I'm going to do when monitor assembly is complete. It's interesting. I see people entering milestones and they put names that mean nothing. You need to make sure that these are probably the things that are going to appear on your stakeholder reports. So make sure that they make sense and they're meaningful to your stakeholders. Yeah. So the predecessor task is task 13. And then the keyboard. So we need to do it for the mouse. So I'm going to do insert again. So when mouse assembly is complete. And again, 0 days. Task ID is 19. Let's enter. And then next, let's do the keyboard. So I'm going to again insert task. Type in when keyboard assembly is complete. And we're going to do 0 days again. And the dependency is dependency 25. And I'm going to hit return. And then finally, I want a milestone that represents when my computer is going to be complete. So I'm going to do when computer, so below the assemble computer here, computer assembly, oh, can't type, is complete. Again, 0 days, and that's going to be dependent on task 27. At any point in time, if you can't see all of this, you've got a number of ways that you can change the scale over here. You can right click on it and do zoom and do 3 months or do entire project, or you can do view and select entire project, and it'll make sure it sets the scale based on your entire project, like so. And obviously going through this, always make sure you save your project. Yeah. So let me just shut that down. I'm not going to save this here. I'm going to do no, because but yourselves make sure you do save the project, because the next thing that we're going to talk about is resourcing within our projects. So let me just go through. I'm going to shut that down. Let's bring this up. So far, this is what you've done. You've done about the expected duration. You've learned about work-based estimates and so on. And we've created our dependencies. So in the next part, we're going to look at our resources. So let me bring up the project plan again. so it's visible. So this is where we left off, and as far as the plan, so we're going to define the resources, we're going to assign the resources to task, we're going to perform some adjustments, and I'll show you some things to avoid and how to predict what MS Projects are going to do when you make adjustments. And then if we've got time, we'll look at how we can plan from left to right and right to left, as I mentioned earlier. So as usual, I'm not going to do this in PowerPoint. So let's escape that. Let's go back to our project plan. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to select the resource ribbon, and I'm going to select the resource sheet for our resources. Yep. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a resource. So the name here is where we typically put the name of our resource. So I'm going to do Jane Smith in here. Now, within project, there are 3 resource types. So work is what we're covering today in today's exercise, which is typically your resources that are going to do the activities or perform the activities on within your plan. You've then got material. So this is a bit like if you are using materials, so you might want to use 10 bags of cement during a task. So you'll use this particular resource type representing the materials that you're using. And then you've got cost. So for example, you might want to, if you're working in construction, you might want to track the cost of steel and concrete against your project. Or it's a commercial project and you've got a third party delivering something as a milestone, and you want to associate an invoice, an expected cost there, then you would use this particular type. So we're going to stick to work. And the material column is if you're using the material type, and that's your unit of measure for your material type. So I'm not going to use that. You can put initials in there. So if you, for example, don't want the full name on your Gantt chart, then you can have the initials. So put some useful initials in there if you want. I'm going to leave that alone. And then in the group, I think it's always important within your project plan to identify the skills or the capabilities in your plan. So I'm going to use group in here, and it's going to help me filter my resources. So Jane is a project manager. So I'm going to do project manager within group. And let's just expand that column so we can see it. Now, the max unit within the resource sheet is what's their max availability to this particular project. So if we go to File, and I do Options, and I do Schedule, you can see within our project that our default start time is 8 o'clock in the morning. It finishes at 5. There's 8 hours per day. Based on a 5-day week, there's 40 hours in that week, and we're saying that there's 20 days in a month, right? So if you take that as an example, then Jane is available to this project 5 days a week, being 100%. Then as far as the standard rate, Jane is £80, because I'm here in Blighty, so that's £80 per hour. Now, the overtime rate we're not going to use. We've then got cost of use. Now, I must admit, I've never used this, but the way that you would use this is, for example, if this person uses a set of machinery and there's a cost associated to the use of that machinery when they're using machinery, is then you would put that cost of use in here. And that, again, would be prorated against the lifespan of that task. But we're not going to use that. We then got prorated. So again, there's 3 types of accrual. So this is how it's going to be accrued against the task. So start is a lump sum. So all the costs will be lumped at the start of the task based on that overall work. The end is the opposite. It's lumped right at the end. So the cost is incurred right at the end. And prorated is it's flat against the entire life cycle of that particular task. So we're going to stick to the default, which is prorated. Now, again, I wouldn't want to make you type all this out. Again, I would suggest it, but what I'm going to do is, again, in the part 2 folder, you'll see another Excel file where you've got all the resources defined here. And I think the one thing I do want to say is, what I didn't miss off, which reminded me looking at, is the code we're going to use for our cost center. Because, you know, typically in any organization, your resources may sit against a different departmental cost center, and there might be some intercompany cross-charging. So again, I'm going to put ABC in here for Jane's cost center, like so. And then for the rest of them, I'm just going to go to my spreadsheet. I'm going to copy from Fred all the way to Control Copy, go back to Project, and I'm going to do Control V, and there are all my resources. And again, don't forget to save this as MS Project Training Part 2 when you're following this in the exercise. Okay. Now, one of the things in MS Project is it's really good at handling cost changes. So, for example, if we got, you know, during our workshops, we knew that within cost center XYZ, those resources would have a fully loaded cost uplift of 10% from the 1st of August. So how would we represent that in MS Project so it calculates the full life of the project accordingly? So based on the current rate and then the new rate when that comes into force or becomes effective. The way that you could do that is if I go to Fred Blogs and I double click on him, and I open up the resource dialog box and click costs. I'm then going to select just below. So there's the current standard rate. I'm going to select the effective date below. I'm going to select the 1st of August, which is a Friday. Then here, because it's a 10% increase, I'm going to do 10, or 10%, and I'm going to hit enter. And it's automatically calculated the 10% uplift for me. There you go. And I click OK. So let me do the same for Bill Street. And again, I can type in, so 0108, and depending where you are, obviously you'd enter this different. Because I'm in Blighty, we're day, month, year. So let's do 25, and let's do 10%. And hit enter, and there we go. And click OK. And that's how you would change resource costs and the way that it would, in a time phase way, account for that in your project plan's life cycle and overall cost. So once we've done that, we need to assign our resources to our project plan. Now, there are many different ways of doing this. And I'll show you as many different ways as possible as we go through these exercises. But if I click, or start on the resource ribbon, but I change my view to be Gantt chart, I then hit the assign resources, it brings up this dialog box, this assign resource dialog box. And if you can't see these filters here, so just click this and these filters become available. Now, what I'm about to show you won't be particularly useful because we've only got 5 resources in our project plan. However, if you think about the fact that sometimes you've got 150, 200, 300 resources in your plan, this is where it becomes really useful and also really important for you to define resources as far as their skill sets and capability. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I want to assign the resources to non-electronic type tasks, or assembly tasks. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on the filter here, I'm going to do the drop down, and if you remember, within the resource sheet, we set their resource capabilities within the group. So I'm going to select group, then I get this dialog box, and within here, I'm going to type assembler and hit return. And it's now filtered my resource pool, for want of a better word, to only show assemblers. Yeah. So again, if you imagine you've got 300 resources, this is really useful stuff. Now, also doing it this way, you can assign resources to multiple tasks at the same time. So if we take, we're going to assign Bill Street to a number of tasks. So if I take the assemble main unit, I'm then going to hold down my control key and I'm going to select assemble main unit, build mouse body, attach the ball and assemble mouse. Yeah. And over on the right here, I'm going to select Bill and do assign. Let's just move this over so you can see the resources. So you can now see Bill is now assigned to those tasks. So let's do the same for Fred blogs. Now, within the materials again, I've highlighted things in yellow that are important to make sure that you don't miss them and that you do them. So we now need to do the same thing for Fred, and we're going to repeat it. So I'm going to make sure I deselect those tasks. I'm then going to select the first task, which is task 10 for Fred. I'm then going to hold down my control key again. I'm going to select task 13. I'm then going to select task 22, 23, and I'm going to select task 25, and then finally task 27. And over here, I'm going to select Fred and assign him. Boom, and there he is. Now, what you'll notice here as well is that things start to calculate. Yes, so you can see now where we've got someone assigned, it's now starting to impact the duration, etc., where we've done work-based estimates. And also here at the moment, we've got it'll also impact the way that the duration and the work is calculated for our fixed duration, because we're adding that final part of that formula, which is the resource. Now I'm going to deselect those tasks. So I'm going to select a milestone, and I need to do the same thing for our technicians for the electronic type tasks. So I'm going to do the drop down over here in the assign resources, select group again, and this time I'm going to type technician. Like so, and I'm going to hit return. Now, the first one we're going to do is Gary. So I'm going to select task 4, which is the hard disk drive. I'm also going to hold down the control key. I'm going to select the video card and the motherboard. I'm also going to select the finished mouse electronics, which is task 18. And I'm going to select Gary and click assign. And then you're going to select the mouse. I deselect those again, because if you don't deselect them when you're pressing the control key, it'll keep adding the task to it. So let's do Mary. So Mary is task 11. Assemble cathode again. How old am I with that? I'm going to hold down the control key, select task 12 and task 24. Ignore these red guys in a minute. We'll sort them out in a minute. I'm going to select Mary and I'm going to select assign. So I've now assigned all those resources, and I'm going to click close because we don't need that open anymore. So I've now assigned all the resources. Now I would avoid typing names in here, because inadvertently you could create additional resources. So for example, somebody like me might type Jane with a Y instead of a Jane, and that'll create a new resource, and we don't want to do that. Now, again, just play around with the zoom here. If you keep losing this on your screen, just keep resizing it based on the changes. So again, if I do view entire project, it just changes it based on now the overall lifespan of the project. It scaled it accordingly. And if I look at Jane as a project manager, as you probably realise, there's no actual tasks in here for Jane to do. And this is the other thing that's really crazy to me, is that I've seen project managers and the way they handle this in an MS project plan is they'll create a manual task and then they'll add themselves to that task. And as the project expands or moves to the left or moves to the right, they'll manually adjust that task accordingly, which to me feels a little bit nuts. I want projects to do the work for me. I don't want to do the work. So there are schools of thought where they say don't attach resources, assign resources to summary tasks. But in this instance, I think it's a valid way that to use our build a project summary task, because this is the whole lifespan of our project. So I'm going to go to the resources, I'm going to do the drop down, and I'm going to tick Jane Smith, and then I'm going to click off it. So there's Jane. Now, Jane is allocating 1 day a week to this project over a whole in working week. So the way that we would represent that, and that's how it's going to be costed as well. So over here in the formula bar, I'm going to tick here, yep, and I'm going to enter or do an open square bracket, and then I'm going to do 20% and do a close square bracket and hit return. Now, like Excel, when you change things here, you see this green little indicator here, and you'll see the exclamation mark. I'm going to click that. It's asking me 2 questions based on me changing the units against this particular task. So, do I want to change the duration and keep the work the same? Well, no, I don't, because it's a summary task, and I want the summary task to drive the work, and I want the child task to drive the duration. So I want to choose this one here. So change the amount of work accordingly, but keep the duration the same. So I'm going to select that, and it's gone. So I've now assigned Jane to the project, and she's covered, and that will automatically change as you go through that progressive elaboration of your project and report progress, slippage, etc. Yeah. Now, as you'll notice, we are over allocated, and I'm a big believer, and let me take a swig of water. I'm a huge believer that good evening, Sanjith. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right there. Good evening to you. Hopefully you're finding this informative. I'm hoping people are finding this informative. I'm lost in my own world here, as I sometimes do. I get quite tunnel vision sometimes. I can't multitask, but there you go. Good evening, and welcome. So I'm a firm believer that any project has to be achievable, and if you've got over allocated resources, that tells me your project plan is fundamentally flawed. It's not achievable. You can't achieve it. You have to. I'm a big believer in work balance. You know, I work to live. I don't live to work. Yeah, and I think it's really important to make sure that your project plan starts off. You're always going to have your peaks and troughs, but you plan to make it achievable. Now, one of the things that we talked about within the workshops is that all our resources would be allocated 20% of their time. That's how we're going to allocate them across their tasks. Now, this is where I see a lot of frustrations with project managers who really struggle to get project to do what they want. And it's because they don't understand how project is calculating or how task types impact how a project calculates work, duration, etc. So let me bring up another slide here for you. And this table that I will show you. So if I select this and then go here. So within projects, you've got 3 different task types. And I think it's really important you understand these. You've got fixed units. Yeah. You've got fixed work and fixed duration. So let's look at how these impact when you're making changes. And particularly if you think about our fixed duration tasks, is if we are making changes to our allocation of resources, then it's going to impact the duration, and we don't want that on our fixed duration. Yeah. So if I bring up the table, this matrix here. So if you think about your different task types, and you can set these within your task information dialog box on the advanced tab. So if we take a fixed units type task, if you revise the units, yeah, it's going to recalculate the duration. And also on our fixed duration task, where we've done a duration type estimates, we don't want that. Let me get my laser up and running. If you revise again on a fixed unit, in fact, let's go all the way down the bottom. So for fixed work, if you revise the unit, it will again recalculate the duration. However, if you've got a fixed duration task type, it will recalculate the work itself. It won't impact the duration. Now, if we again take where you revise it, so that's if you revise the unit, i.e. the resource allocation or the number of resources, yeah? If you take the revise duration piece here, then I think the important thing here is that on a fixed unit, when you recalculate the duration, it's going to recalculate the work. On a fixed work type task, it will recalculate the unit, i.e. the resource allocation itself. And if you've got multiple resources, it will look at all of their allocations, their percentage allocations. And then for a fixed duration, it will revise the work. Yep. And then finally, if you revise the work against your task, yeah, so the work estimate, for example, on a fixed units task, it will recalculate the duration. On a fixed work task, it will also recalculate the duration. And then on a fixed duration, yeah, it will recalculate the unit. Yeah. So for our task where we've done a duration-based estimate, we need to set the task type to fixed duration. All the other tasks where we put work-based estimates, we don't need to change that, because if we revise the unit, it's going to recalculate the duration, not the work, and that's what we want it to do. So again, I'm not going to show you in PowerPoint, so let's do this in MS Project. Yeah, so let me escape out of that. So how do you change the task type? So let's look at our assemble main unit. So I want to change Bill Street to be 20% allocated to this, but I don't want it to change the duration on our main unit assembly, because these are all duration-based estimates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that task. It's going to bring up the task information. I'm going to select the advanced tab, and here on task type, I'm going to change that to fixed duration. So fixed unit is the default. I'm going to click OK. Now I can also select all the tasks here. Yeah, so I can fit and do them, change them in bulk. So if I select all these to main assembly, on the task ribbon, go to information, and again do advanced. I'll change the task type to fixed duration and click OK. And there you go. So I've now changed all those task type. So I need to change all my fixed duration or my duration-based estimate tasks to fixed duration. So it's easy to tell, because anything with a question mark is estimated based on the work, and anything where the question mark is missing is where we've put that duration-based estimate. So the build mouse body, so I need to select that, the activities, and I'm going to select information, and I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to change the task type to fixed duration and click OK. I'm then going to go to so this is work-based estimates, so I'm going to leave those alone. Then the final thing is assemble computer. I'm going to select that, double click it, advanced, and I'm going to change that to fixed duration and click OK. And there you go. So I've now changed them all to fixed duration. I can now make changes to my resource allocations, and I know that project is going to recalculate the work, and on my work-based estimates, it'll recalculate the duration, which is what I want it to do. Yep. So there's a number of ways that you can change the allocation. So let's double click on the assemble main unit. And again, if I click on the resources tab, I can also assign many resources through this method as well. So I'm going to change the units to 20%. So I'm going to hit 20, hit enter. Now you'll notice here there's a cost here of £120. That's how much it is going to cost for that task based on the previous allocation. If I click OK, I get this exclamation mark. I'm going to do the drop down. It's defaulted to change the amount of work, but keep the duration the same. I'm going to accept that. That's fine. If I double click on that now, you'll notice that the cost has changed based on reducing the allocation of the resource. So it's going to cost less on that task. Yeah. And I'm going to click OK. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Bill and I'm going to do Control Copy. And for all Bill's tasks, and keep an eye on these red men, you'll notice they'll start to disappear. So I've copied that. Let's take this task here and do Control V. Yeah. Let's do find Bill there. I'm going to do Control V. Paste it in, Control V. And you'll notice it's highlighting where it's making changes and recalculations. I'm going to do Control V there as well. So that's Bill. Let's do Gary. Now, another way of doing that is I can go into the formula bar and just do open square bracket and type in 20%. Close that square bracket and hit return. And there we go. I'm going to ignore this because I know it's the default calculation is what I want. I'm going to do Control Copy. In fact, there I could just drag that down for Gary. Then just copy Gary there, do Control Copy. Got Gary there. Do Control V. And again, any more for Gary? No. Let's do Fred here, Fred Blogs. So again, I can go into here and just click and then click to the right. That's a bit finicky. That's why I like the formula bar. I can do open square bracket, 20%, and close that square bracket and hit return. Now you'll notice based on that, the duration has changed based on that calculation. So it's recalculated the duration. That's what we want it to do. I'm going to do Control Copy. And I'm going to do Control V on Fred and just find other Fred tasks. And you can filter the view for any resource. I'm going to do Control V there. And then finally, I'm going to do Mary up here and do 20%. Close that square bracket. Just drag that down. Do Control Copy there as well. We've got Mary there. I'm going to do Control Copy and do Control V. Control Copy. It's not playing ball, people. There we go. User error there. I wasn't obviously copying it. So we've now taken care of all those resources. Now remember to keep saving your projects. Yeah. And if I do, I want to look at my resource usage, for example, which is another useful screen to look at. So let's look at what our resource usage and their assignments against those tasks are. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the taskbar selected, task ribbon, should I say, do the drop down. I'm going to select resource usage. Now here I'm going to do view. Works exactly the same as the Gantt chart, or the graphical view. I'm going to do entire project on the view, and you can see the hours. So I can see, if I expand this here, I can see Jane build a computer. I can see the work she's working each day here, and you can actually amend these manually, and it will change the overall allocation and work against that task. Also, within here, if I right click on here, the default is that everyone's allocated flat against the task, but you can change that. So if I right click on the assignment here within resource usage and do information, you can see the work contour. So at the moment, the default is flat, but you could do backloaded, so all the work ramps up and it's back end loaded, or front end loaded. So you got a lot of work at the front, then it ramps down, or you could have a double peak, early peak, late peak, bell shape, or turtle. You can get as complicated as you want, and I would recommend avoid it. Simple is best. So stick to the flat contour shape and how resources are allocated in your plan. Okay. And the one thing that you can see here is that you can see we've got a number of tasks here which happen to be milestones unassigned. Now, again, I'm fairly old-fashioned. I'm a big believer that uh, milestones should have the project manager allocated to them. And that's because the project manager is ultimately accountable for the delivery of the project. But also, in addition, so is the sponsor. So it's always good practice, I feel, to have at minimum the project manager's name against the milestones. It doesn't impact the allocation because there's zero duration, but also it wouldn't hurt to have the sponsor's name in there as well, because that's the thing that would appear on any type of stakeholder reporting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Gantt chart. And in fact, I'm going to filter on milestones. I'm then going to do resource and pull up the assign resource, get rid of the filter, and I'm going to select the milestones here. Again, holding that control key down. Then I'm going to select Jane, and I'm going to assign Jane to those milestones. And then I'm just going to close that. I'm going to remove the filter. And let's do the view to entire project. Wonderful. Go to the task view, because if I'm on the resource view and I do the drop down, and I'm going to do resource usage. And there you can see there's Jane. There's all the milestones, etc., now allocated to those milestones. And we've now got a fully resourced project plan. So what I'm going to do, you can allocate, you can look at this, you can look at costs as well. So you can look at the cost information. You can add all kinds of things in here to for the view in here. So I'm going to go back to my Gantt chart. And again, what I would do is make sure you save this as MS Project Training Part 2. And I think I've been going for an hour and 17 minutes. That is where I'm going to leave it. Now, at the end of Part 2, you'll see in the materials, and I've put in the support tool. So if you download those help materials, so in Part 2, you'll see based on a start to finish MPP file, project file, try and do that final activity. So if I pull that up and show you what that looks like. Yeah. So this is the final part, and I'll leave you guys to do this offline. So this project file that you'll see in the PDF, you don't need to do this. I've put the project file in the support materials I've given you. It's in Part 2. It's called Part 2 based on a start or finish, and it's a project file. So go and open that, and there's 2 questions in there. So figuring out how you can use project to answer this question. If I start my project on the 5th of September 2025, when will that project finish? And then the second question is, if my project needs to be delivered on the 28th of October 2025 to meet a deadline, when do you need to start it to meet that deadline? So I'm going to leave you with that exam question. I hope you found it informative. Next week, I'll do another live stream, and this time, hopefully, I won't have any technical difficulties, where we will continue and what we will cover. And I'm more than happy for you to continue without me, but you'll see there's the exercise. But in Part 3, we'll look at constraints, and which I think is really important to understand. We'll look at the concepts of critical path, deadlines, and how to baseline your project plan. And then we'll finish off with part 4, where we'll look at how to use the status state to report progress in line with your local governance within your organization, and how to report progress, how to report slippage, and how to look at some of the reporting as well. So we'll do that next week at the same time. So if you found it helpful and informative, please remember to click that like, subscribe, and smash that notifications button. It really helps the channel. And also, as always, wherever you are in the world, I wish you an absolutely wonderful day. And please take care. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video from Change, Tips and Tools. Bye-bye now.